I'd like to call the special meeting of the Board of Education.
Mike.
to order.
Mike.
Thank you. I would like, pardon, I just turned it on. Are we good now? Okay. With that, I would like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 13th at 7:30 PM in the board meeting room. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's special meeting. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to review any last items before next week's vote. First, on any outstanding ad cut items, and subsequently the overall operating and capital budgets. That's next week. Tonight, we'll start with the special education transportation option Rich and Alan presented. I've been in touch with the Board of Finance Chair and the chairs of RTM, F&B, and Education, and all are in support of us pursuing this option. Following that, we'll take any additional questions from board members on the rest of the budget. In advance of next week, one item I ask board members to plan for. When we go through the ad cut list, if you put forward the ad or cut, and would like it to be voted on and discussed and or voted on, you will be asked to motion accordingly. To then go to further discussion and subsequently a vote, each motion will require a second. We'll go over that again before next week's meeting, and you're welcome to call me with questions. Tonight, we'll have time for public comment after our discussions. I would ask members of the public to understand that we greatly value public input, but have also heard quite a bit in person here at the board table, via email and via direct phone calls. If you have something to communicate that is new, please do. If what you would like to say has already been said, please feel free to concisely indicate that or to remain quiet because it has been said. Before I move into the meeting proper, I would like to take a minute to honor Kathy Schultz, a 30-year employee of the district who died last week. I knew her as an assistant principal at Tokenique. She and Mary Michelson, the principal, were known for their focus on a kind but firm culture. Parents trying to drop off forgotten items were often met at the door by either of them and sent back home. I have a few favorite memories of Kathy, but I'll leave the ones that will embarrass my kids at home. One of my very favorite public memories of Kathy was watching her during a presentation of the Citizenship Awards at the end of a board meeting. The student was standing here at the podium. Kathy was in the audience. I sat right behind her, and her joy at watching a young Tokenique student being honored was palpable. In fact, she could barely keep her seat. Kathy, the care and love of the students who passed your doors came from deep inside of you, and seeing you not be able to contain it was awe-inspiring. Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor the life of beloved educator Kathy Schultz. Thank you. I mentioned culture a minute ago. I am no longer at Tokenique. We moved and my littlest is being raised a husky. However, like Kathy, Mary, and the Tokenique staff during those years, we all have a role in creating and maintaining a healthy culture. A culture that values dialogue, learning, personal and organizational growth, care for people, and listening to understand. Here at this table, it is our responsibility to set the tone we wish for ourselves, for our administrators, our staff, and hopefully as a result, our students and parents. How we handle ourselves up here matters. We are facing a very difficult budget season, as we well know. Our budget is at a historic high. Without accounting for prior investment decisions involving Oxridge, Hanley Homes and Royal, and yes, Great Island, our budget is at a historic high. We will make our decisions next meeting. As we know, we won't be making them tonight, but as a review, the largest items the board is deliberating include: 1, right-sizing enrollment to staff, particularly at middle school, where we are also looking at instructional or SRBI support via 2 FTE equivalents and mental health support via privately funded Teen Talk. 2, capacity in arts and music. 3, restructuring FTEs within administration. And lastly, options for special education transportation. We'll begin with that last item tonight. Alan and Rich, I turn it over to you to walk us through the budget and appropriation processes and implementation timeline you recommend. Thank you.
So the special education is, as we discussed it last week, it would be taking ownership for the special education, bringing it on site here, potentially using somewhere like Tokenique as a spot to hold the buses. I referred to the memorandum that was distributed at the last board meeting. Our plan would be, if things should go accordingly, would be to have it in order by the start of August. It just would be too heavy a lift to actually pull it off. The appropriation, we think, would be just too difficult to pull that off by March, and also get to thus ensure that we have things ready for the summer programs. So we would suggest that we do this for the start of the school year. It is in the actual ad cut with the support for the summer programs. So the actual what's in the ad cut list plans for having it starting in the actual fall. We would suggest then that potentially bringing it to the Board of Finance. There's a couple of options for that particular appropriation. We could either bring it to the Board of Finance on the 13th, or you could bring it to the Board of Finance at our March 5th meeting. That's where we're presenting the budget. There is a regular Board of Finance meeting on the 12th of March, and thereafter there would be an RTM meeting on the 18th. So yeah, if we're not trying to make the appropriation for early March, we can go with that actual timetable. That would seems it would work okay in order to meet for the start of the school year. That's the essence of the appropriation for that particular budget item for special education transportation.
Rich, is there anything you'd like to add?
So the reason we'd have to ask for an appropriation, why the timing is crucial, the buses aren't like going to a car dealership where you can just kind of go there, give the check and take the car home with you that same day. Especially the type 2 buses that we're talking about, there is a lead time to get them built, get them lettered, get them certified, and have them delivered. So in an ideal scenario, we would get funding sometime in April so that we can issue that purchase order and then take delivery of those vehicles in summer.
So your ideal timeline is to receive after the 10-day window expires, that should be April.
Correct. So we can't issue a purchase order until that 10-day window has passed. So if it plays out where the Board of Ed approves an appropriation on the 13th, and then it goes to the Board of Finance in early March, and then it goes to the RTM in mid-March, then we can issue that purchase order in early April. And that would give us enough lead time to get those vehicles in time for the start of the school year.
And then Alan mentioned not doing ESY. Can you talk a little bit more about the operational aspect of not starting at that in the
So
summer?
the concern, obviously, with anything that has supply chain concerns is any delay push that out. So while we've been in contact with dealerships, whether it be for the Suburbans, the wheelchair vans, or the Type 2s, and they've given us a time frame, if there's a hiccup in terms of getting a part to get them assembled and delivered, then that pushes that up closer to ESY. So if you push it back for just the start of August, it gives you a little bit of leeway in terms of if you do have a supply chain issue that does develop that's unexpected. If you end up doing that, then in the following year budget, if you look forward to fiscal year 26, you can take that reduction for ESY transportation as a savings in fiscal year 26.
Okay, before I open it up to board questions, can you walk us through how the appropriation and the budgetary line items work together for this?
So the Board of Ed, if on ad cut night chooses to make the decision to go forward with this reduction to the operating budget, it would be a savings of about $404,000. So then on the 13th, that same day, probably right after the ad cut, you'd make the motion to request the appropriation. It would go through the bodies, and then assuming it's approved, we'd go forward and order it. If worst case scenario, let's say it's not approved, whether it be by the Board of Finance or the RTM, the Board of Ed would then have to reconcile their budget between the final appropriation by the RTM and what you've received. And so by June 30th, if let's say the appropriation fails, you would have to make a reconciling adjustment to your budget of that $404,000.
Okay, board questions. Sarah.
So thank you for walking us through the Board of Finance and RTM timeline. This will require some P and Z action as well? Can we
Yes.
discuss that timeline and does that all fit in here?
I have reached out to Steve. I don't have confirmation that, but he does understand, and you had a further conversation with him, right, John? You want to characterize that?
Yeah, they are well aware of the full context of this request. And would, as common practice of P and Z, would expedite a town request approval. Yeah, I can't guarantee Tokenique, but I'm sure we can find, if by chance it's denied, we can find another area. I guess one question, Rich, on the, if I may.
Yeah, that answers,
Sorry.
yeah,
Thanks, no.
go ahead.
On the location at Tokenique, just where are you talking? Remind us where you're talking about. The
So
parking.
it abuts there's a small strip of parking spaces, about, I think, 7 or 8 parking spaces that abut like an open grass field. That would be the location so that they're away from staff cars, or if parents are at the school, parent cars. It would really just be there. If for whatever reason, let's say P and Z says, no to Tokenique, there's no way you can park them there. I mean, there is an option to park the vehicles here. Obviously, it would take a significant amount of spaces out of central office. While it wouldn't be necessarily a huge issue on normal days, it might be an issue on like voting days, for example, where this is a voting spot. There is a little bit of room at the middle school. So that could potentially be an option, but those are really your 3 chances in terms of parking those type 2s.
Yeah, so again, brief conversation, well aware of the context, the expedited nature of this, and the need to find a spot within town somewhere.
I would just say that historically it's been difficult, difficult over the middle school with buses and the traffic flow and so on and so forth. So that's an added dimension.
Yes. Julie, do you want to answer that one?
Nope.
Julie?
Thank you. Rich, just quick on the contract with First Student, do we run into any trouble if we need busing for the summer, but then not after ESY?
No, so we would engage for the summer. And worst case, if we can't use them, we would have another vendor lined up.
Okay, thank you.
John?
And just proper budgeting practices, knowing that we don't have everything perfect in terms of approval. You feel comfortable in allowing this to be budgeted for the next?
I do. I mean, at the end of the day, if the appropriation fails, so similar to last year when we made reconciling changes in May to restore the receptionist position, the board would have to, we'd give you options on what you'd have to change, and the board would have to vote yes or no to reconcile those out. It would just have to happen before June 30th.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Robin?
Just in terms of the 2 items that are currently in the capital budget, I know that there was a potential line there that we could take it out of the capital budget and have it be part of the appropriation, or what is your preference for that?
If we're going to go for an appropriation for 5 type 2s, a wheelchair van and a Suburban, at that point, you might as well take them out of the capital budget and do it as one big bundle. So we'll ask for the appropriation for the extra Suburban and the wheelchair van.
But for next week, are we keeping it in the capital budget for the?
So I would
timing or
think,
no?
so if, when you do the ad cut night, and if the board chooses to approve the transportation proposal in the operating budget, then you should probably vote to cut them out of the capital budget and then request it for the appropriation.
Okay. Anything else? Greg?
Just in terms of utilization of the vehicles, is it like being used all day, or are there potential alternative uses that either we can use throughout the school system or to generate revenue or anything like that?
So they're typically used in the morning and the afternoon. There's a little bit in the middle of the day because some of them do ELP runs. The timing isn't great to use them for things like athletics, because athletics, needs the buses at 2:30 and they're out on the road doing dismissal and picking up the kids. So we do make the drivers who are employed here do other work. Some of them are lunch monitors and recess aides, things like that. But there's not really a lot of opportunity to use them for something else, given.
What about like away games for sports teams?
So typically, again, like if it's the high school, they would need to depart at, let's say, 2:30. Those buses are on the road picking up kids.
Weekends?
We could use them for weekends. I mean, the type 2s are considered 30-pack buses. So you can't use them for large teams, but there's a potential maybe to use them for smaller teams.
Great.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Okay, so we will be voting on it next week. If you do find you have questions in the interim, please send them to Alan with me and copy. Okay. All right. With that, we'll move on to the rest of the budget discussion. Alan, is there anything in your notes that you prepared for this meeting that you'd like to review?
The only thing that I'd like to review is from the last meeting that we had that we entered on the spreadsheet. It is in the spreadsheet somewhere, if I can read small print. Can you pull that up for me, please?
Yeah.
So we realize an efficiency with First Student just by restructuring the payments for our bus contract. So I think was that $40,000?
So it's $40,000. It's a 1.5% reduction on just the home to school portion of the contract.
What does that mean, Rich?
So home to school is the large 72 passenger buses that pick up and drop off at the 7 different schools. Based on payment, currently we pay monthly. So we pay a portion of it up front. And so in order to do that, they would give us a discount of 1.5% on the cost of just those buses.
You could just point that out on the spreadsheet for me, please. It's very small.
Highlighted in green on row 57, 40,307.
Yeah.
That was below. That was below the.
The other transportation,
Yes.
that's correct, because it's separate.
Question?
Yes, Robin.
Is that also included in the ad cut spreadsheet, the revised spreadsheet that you had sent out?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from you, Alan and Rich?
No, just we did answer the question. So if there's anything from the board, from the responses to those questions, I'm quite happy to entertain those also.
Okay. Are there other board questions?
Is this on the packet?
Well, the packet, or I'm happy to open it up beyond the packet. We can start with the packet. Any questions on the packet? No. Okay. With that, let's go ahead, Robin.
Just one question, regarding the department chair for world language. I had one additional question just about the foreign exchange programs and how that would be handled or who would organize those going forward.
So if there was a stipend position, I would fully expect that the stipend position would support those particular programs.
And if I could just add, there is another field trip that's being sponsored through another department. So there are those cases where it's supported beyond the world language department chair as well. For example, the English department chair.
Sarah?
So I sent an email asking for a specific breakdown of how the world language department's current department chairs' responsibilities would be spread amongst them. I didn't receive a response. Can you elaborate? Do you have anything prepared to share? I need to understand how those responsibilities are going to be delineated to feel comfortable with this. And currently I don't, so.
So some of the responsibilities will be delineated through some of the assistant principals because there's going to be supervision that is required, evaluation and supervision. So some of them will go through there. We will have the coordinator positions. Both Carolyn and Amy will also provide a lot in their areas of expertise of world language. But again, that's a time and place now that they have that expertise, but that they will still be providing some oversight there. So it'll be between the building principal leadership, the stipend positions, the assistant principals.
Okay, and who do you see as the face of the world language department? Like I'm thinking, when I spoke last week about the incoming 9th grade event where all the department chairs were up there, who do you envision being that person?
So that would be, to me, that would be an administrative decision of how best to handle that. It can either be an assistant principal or it can be a member of the administration. I mean, I don't know that I see one particular person at this particular point.
I don't mean the name. Is that person going to be consistent throughout the years? Who would parents call if they were questioning placement? Would that be the guidance counselor? Is there a specific person for world language questions? Like the logistics piece is what's missing.
So you would still do the same sort of communication protocol going through the teacher. And then that would if it's not a curricular issue, it would then go through the assistant principal. I mean, that's kind of what would happen.
Any more on the world language chair? While we're on that topic. Do we have some stipended? Right, yes.
Yes.
So would it not be the stipended folks?
Well, not for all, not necessarily for all matters. If it's more of a counseling issue for placement or so on and so forth, that could go to an assistant principal or go to a guidance counselor, depending on what the issue happens to be.
So do I understand correctly that the stipended role would be more instructional leadership and sort of curriculum strategy, if you will? And the primary folks on student management would be the assistant principal and or counseling staff? Is that correct?
Yes, and I would also add, as far as just designing assessments, that would fall more within the coordinator role as well.
All right. Anything else on world language? Looks like, no. Okay. Other topics? Julie?
Excuse me, this is from the packet, so I'm still in the packet. I hope that's all right. We had a chart in the packet that lays out team changes back on the middle school possibilities. And I think there's a new one in here that we have not discussed yet, so I just wanted to touch on it quickly, the 3-team grade model.
Sure.
Which I guess is like every grade loses a team and we have 3 larger teams at each grade.
So there were 3 models that were shown there. One was reduce a team. In this case, it just shows the 7th grade. It could be depending on the needs of the students and their course signups and other variables there. It could be, it depends what grade level that would be. But one just shows you just reduce a team, one team from a grade level. The other one shows you the split team model, where you would both have violet teams for want of a better description, and teachers would be split between the violet teams in 7th grade and 8th grade. Again, dependent on the needs of the student body in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade. But that's an example of how it might work, where for all intents and purposes, the students wouldn't perceive any difference. There would be teachers who would be teaching both in 7th grade and 8th grade. Admittedly, that class size would be a bit, well, it would be smaller than the other teams, right? Well, let me make that clear, for the core subjects though, right? So for specials, music, so on, they would be all mixed in. And then there was a 3-team model, and that would essentially have teachers, I have to say, potentially teaching across teams and up and down the teams, right? So amongst the teams and up vertically and horizontally, so that they would be sharing right across. I think that's in all honesty, a higher lift, a bit more difficult lift. But we were asked to show a couple of team models, and this is kind of what we have.
What will be your sort of framework for looking at how you make decisions? And I ask that in part because from what I see, and Rich, chime in here, please. We are going to have some modest increase in enrollment, though we aren't going to reach our peak. So we're going to be needing to look for some flexibility in how we think about teams in the coming years, given enrollment fluctuations. How are you thinking about this on a multi-year basis?
So I see Carolyn is actually right before us, but for this particular year, and actually for any particular year, because we've had variations of this over the years to one degree or another. So it's sort of like it's sort of changed over the years and from one version of this to another. But in any given year, you're going to look at the needs of the kids in terms of what is their special education needs, what is their course sign-up needs, what's their mathematical needs. And from there, yeah, we'll make decisions on what's the best actual model at that particular point. So in any given year, it'll be those variables. Now, maintaining the team process is important. So I know the board has expressed a desire to do that. So we will be doing that, and also ensuring that as far as we can that teachers are on dedicated teams as much as possible. But predominantly, it will be needs of the students will drive the actual model itself. I don't know if Carolyn wants to speak to that or not, but that's,
I
Carolyn,
agree with everything that you said. It's the needs of the students and the course requests and the supports that drive how we schedule the students each year.
thank you. Katie?
I have a couple questions about this, starting with slide number 2 that shows just the reduction of one team in one grade. I'm struggling to understand how this helps to adjust the classroom sizes. That was my understanding was the goal of this. I'm struggling to understand how that adjusts the classroom sizes for the entire middle school. It seems to me that this would only increase class sizes for the one grade level that's impacted and not do anything to the 2 others. So then we're really just adjusting class sizes for a third of the student population.
so they were just asked to present various team models. So that's what we did, just present the various team models. The one we're leaning toward more would be a split team model.
So then to that, I would say that I don't consider this to be a true team model if a team is not composed of 2 grade levels. Those students are not going to have classes together and they are not going to be a team. Those are 2 separate mini teams. Like there might be a team of teachers, but that's not a team of students. And I can't imagine parents being very happy with their child being the only one in the grade level who is in a cohort and not a team. And that's essentially what it's doing is like, that is not a team, it's a cohort. The numbers and the social interactions and the impact is going to be felt by a small percentage of students. It's not going to be something that's equally distributed across the school. It's going to be luck of the draw. And I have trouble understanding how that presents a fair and equitable experience to all students at the middle school. For the third model,
Maybe we can stop and have them answer that
sure.
question.
Carol, you want to speak first or?
I completely understand what the concern is, but I also have to highlight that the team is not just the students, the team is also the staff, being able to collaborate together on the needs and the supports of the students. And this split team keeps that together so that it is a team that will have a team meeting dedicated to looking at those specific groups of students, even if they are across grade levels.
Katie, did you have another question?
yeah, so on to the third, I see that you listed how the student size of the teams would be impacted by
Yeah.
reducing from 4 to 3, but I don't see what the staffing difference would be. So if currently we have 6 teachers on each team, how many teachers would we have? And then how would that work? Because currently it's 1 per subject.
So I think we're recognizing that there would be more teachers, like if you take teaching across grade 6 or 7 or 8, and also vertically. So that's a more complicated and probably less desirable option, particularly for our teachers, I would think. Remember, these are a couple of models that we're showing. To do the best model, we're bringing in the consultant to work directly with the principal to see what the actual best model will actually be. But this one here is I don't want to rule it out, but teaching wise, it's certainly the more difficult one.
So Alan, understanding that at the end of the day, what you've described is a more bottom-up model, starting with student need and course requests and just straight up numbers. What is the work you're planning to do over the next 6 months with the consultant what are the questions you're asking to help get to what the solution is? There are trade-offs in each of the solutions that we provide, up to and including the current.
So we will be, after the break, getting the consultant in as soon as we possibly can to work with all our principals. That includes the middle school and the elementary schools. There may be a model that I'm unaware of and that's not represented here. I'm not quite sure what that would be, but he'll be working with Carolyn and certain staff members around the needs of the kids and addressing the model, making or implementing a model or designing a model that will work best for our kids around these particular needs that they have for the program. So ultimately, the consultant does have to come in, does have to sit through the meetings with the administration, work hand in hand with them in working through these issues, and that's what we intend to do.
Carolyn, do you want to add anything to that?
No, it's just really looking at what's in the best interest of students and looking at the supports and the courses and building a schedule based on their needs, while trying to maintain the team model as best as possible, because we do feel that's important.
Okay, Robin?
On the first option, if you basically just reduced one team, say, in seventh grade, for instance, based on a smaller grade level, then I'm assuming that following year, that same grade level would have a lower number of students. Would that mean then that the eighth grade would then be reduced one team? And are the teachers flexible enough that a teacher who is teaching seventh grade class could then switch to teaching eighth grade? And I'm just trying to
Well,
understand how that would
they
work.
are certified to teach all the grade levels. On any given year, I don't think there would be any guarantee of what, depending again on the needs of our students as from one year to next year. So I don't think we would say it would just automatically follow that the class size would be the same or the structure would be the same.
Meaning that we have to adjust year over year, that
Yes.
our teachers move between grades on a
Correct.
regular basis or semi-regular basis. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay. What percentage of our students, I see you, Dave, what percentage of our students in the current, in the current model have a true team model experience? Pure experience?
Carla, do you have a better idea than I?
The majority of them right now, the rainbow classes are mostly the advanced math classes, and every student's associated with the team.
Thank you. Dave?
Just want to make sure I'm following this right. So originally there was a thought we're going to get rid of a team. Then there was a number of models presented here where the scenarios you laid out. And I think I'm hearing now that we have a consultant coming in and then that's going to determine what our model is going to be going forward. Is that the process at this time?
Yeah, ultimately, yes, because I don't want to rule out that I think he has to meet and work through these scenarios with administration.
Thank you.
Julie?
Thank you. A couple thoughts, specific on the split team model, which Katie kind of touched on. I just want to go back again to the mini team, and the strong similarity that has to cohorting. And I think we learned things coming out of cohorting after COVID. I mean, I know there were students whose cohorts were kind of identified by individual classes that they all shared, right? So you had a very similar kind of cohort
Yes.
/ mini team
Mhm.
rather than a diverse mini team, which of course we all know is not ideal. So that design gives me great pause from the start. I am also still struggling with this idea that we're trying to right size the class sizes, and yet we're speaking only in averages, and we're not talking a design that lends itself or helps me understand how it's going to be that we're going to have the right number of kids in the room coming out of this shuffle, to make up a word. So I don't know what we can say to that at this point. But it doesn't seem like that piece is baked in any way. And if that's where we're starting from, and I think that's been the challenge all along, that's why it's so hard to be flexible with this model, then I'm still not feeling assured that we've figured out how to do it. And then the last piece, just on the 3-team model while I'm at it, to me, I can't envision a world where those teachers would be able to meet as a team and would be able to do the work that they need to do in order to best serve their kids and their kids' needs on a day-to-day basis, which is why we're holding on to the team model in the first place. So.
John?
Can somebody tell me, as much as I value the team approach, do we have a policy around teams at Middlesex March? Just to be clear, the answer is no. Okay, thank you. So, I mean, I just go back. We have an explicit policy around matching class sizes within ranges, of course, with giving the superintendent discretion. And he's come back with 3 models with a consultant he's going to work with until the school year. And so I think it's made clear that we're following our policy. There's also multiple policies that look to seek efficiency in how we operate these school districts. So I find it a little troublesome that we don't have a policy. It's a practice and it's a valuable practice in such a large school to run teams, but we have to maintain flexibility in order to run an efficient district.
Katie?
Yeah, I disagree with that statement wholeheartedly. I don't see how this first model accomplishes the goal that was intended whatsoever. It does not apply that policy right sizing of classrooms across the school. It just targets one team. The other two, I think, are erosions of the model. And John, to your point about us not weighing in on something that doesn't have an explicit policy, there are a lot of things that are in this budget that aren't written specific policies. And I think that the board is tasked with ensuring that our school systems maintain the level that's expected by our community, and changing the middle school or beginning to erode the middle school model of teams would be a major departure from the education that our children receive. And that does fall under board purview, in my opinion.
I think we have to be a little careful with a major change in the education that our children receive at this stage. I think that there have been some legitimate questions, but I just think we don't have evidence necessarily that there is definitely an implementation that will fundamentally change everything. I just caution you.
Just the name alone, if we were to remove the team model, then we would more likely call it Middlesex Junior High, because it would be a junior high model.
Well, I would respectfully say this is not like, I have to draw the line here. This is not a junior high model, not by any stretch of imagination. I do recognize that it tinkers with the team model, but there have been years where we've been doing some of this and it's gone, it's gone well. In fact, nobody tends to notice it. I will say this respectfully, and I don't mean to be any particular adult in the room or otherwise. Our children go with the flow on the schedules seamlessly. That doesn't mean to say that may well be, Mr. Radley, but doesn't mean to say it's right that the one that they're being asked to do, whether it's COVID or whether they change a schedule on a dime, right, on a daily basis. These can tend to be, adults honestly can have more difficulty with the models than the children do. That being said, I'm not playing down anybody's comments in the sense of the seriousness of them. But it's certainly not a junior model. Like that's not the case for this, because this maintains the essential components of the team model. I'm confident of that.
Sarah?
Moving away from the team model discussion, can you elaborate more? Because I had a bunch of conversations with parents, since the public hearing, about the piece that I feel like I'm not understanding well is how those additional 2 FTE equivalents for SRBI are going to be used. And can you, if this reduction in force goes through at the middle school, what does that mean? And can you just detail that out again? Like, talk to me like a middle schooler. How does that work?
So essentially, those 2 FTEs, if you think about it as 2 teachers and they're teaching the schedule throughout the day, the 5 periods throughout the day. Those 5 periods are for both teachers. So if you want to say 10 periods a day, would be available for support, stroke, intervention, SRBI for students.
And why is that not happening now? I think that's the confusion piece.
I think that it essentially could happen now. I would recognize that.
So there's the capacity to do it now, but we're just not doing it?
Yes, when we were looking at the 4 to 5 classes, I shared earlier that we didn't make that change, particularly at the middle school, because of the number of changes that the children were going through COVID, through changes in administration. It wasn't just the time to actually do that.
So is it correct to say that what you just explained is that you didn't change the teaching load during the past couple of years, but explicitly you're looking to assign that capacity, if you will,
Yes.
of certain teachers to be instructional specialists in SRBI.
Yeah, so
Uh,
as we look through the efficiencies to be realized, that was one of them.
So technically, you could have removed an additional 2 FTE, but you haven't. You reallocated them to SRBI. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, I don't know that we could eliminate it. I don't think we could just eliminate the additional FTEs that way, but they have been reallocated, yes.
Okay. Can you talk about why you chose to allocate them to SRBI? What were you trying to do educationally beyond just providing support? But what was the driver there?
Because discussions on through and through the budget process with the administration, actually prior to the budget process and also during the budget process, focus on interventions, the number of the needs of the students and the number of interventions that we had. We had the SRBI presentation here at the board. So that was an area we felt was continually would be helpful, whether it was formally SRBI or additional support for students through the teachers who are going to actually deliver the instruction with the highest quality instruction, whether it's a math teacher, language arts teacher, or otherwise.
Thank you. Amy, since you gave the SRBI presentation, is there anything you can add to that or would like to add to that?
I would just say that in addition to children moving up through the grades since the pandemic, we have some missed opportunities for learning, and those students are rising toward the middle school now. And so the window to provide supports and services before they're in the 9-12, more content-driven learning experiences are really critical at the middle school. So this provides that opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Carolyn, is there anything you would like to add?
I think they touched upon it. It's just really using the expertise of the teachers in the building and the content that they teach to really hone in on supporting students that might need that extra support.
And again, I thought that for the middle school, I really wanted to concentrate on all aspects of support for students. And that's what we've tried to do in this particular budget.
All aspects of support being what?
Being mental health support, support for special services, support for interventions for students. So those are all of the areas that we have tried to provide in this particular budget season.
Dave has his hand up.
Dave? Thank you, sir.
I just want to make sure I'm following this right, Alan. So we've had the opportunity to deploy some resources for a few years here, whether that be intervention, SRBI, additional resources to students. We have chosen not to do so, but now in a budget conversation, we've decided to redeploy. But while we had that availability over the past couple of years, we just didn't use it.
I won't say we just didn't use it. I used it because
Did we use it or did we not?
well, I'll be happy to answer the question, David.
Thank you.
I thought the timing wasn't right. We did use it. We did use the services, many of the services that the staff are talking about and how they're supporting children beyond the school day and so on and so forth, and even during the school day. So those services were the time and so on was being redeployed. But specifically we didn't, because I thought that the change was at that particular point wasn't the time to make that change.
So coming out of COVID, we didn't think it was appropriate until a couple of years hence, and now we're doing so.
To some degree, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Dennis, did you have a question?
Yeah, Alan, a few moments ago, you referenced that you had examples of changing the teams in the past. Can you elaborate on that and maybe give an example or two of what you did exactly?
Well, I'll ask Caroline to do that. She's had a wee bit of history of some of the ones that have, some of the variations that they've had throughout the years.
Just from quick conversations with staff of learning a little bit about Middlesex, there's been some iteration of all 3 of these models throughout the years. And the current model has built from these, from 3 teams with floating teachers to a split team to now having 4. So from what I understand, Middlesex has over the years encompassed various models that we've presented.
Okay, thank you.
Greg?
I just want to clarify, I understand the previous topic on the SRBIs. So am I hearing it right that we're reducing 2 FTEs to accommodate an increase in SRBIs, or am I mishearing that?
No, they're not being reduced for that.
Marge, can you explain how that's happening?
Well, we're just not asking for additional interventionists because we're using the extra capacity.
And that
to
extra
fill those
capacity
seats
comes from,
from teachers who are only teaching 4 right now.
so we have 40 teachers who are only teaching 4, and they are contractually obligated to teach a 5th. So we are deploying that 5th period as SRBI or instructional support, correct? Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Yes, Katie.
At the bottom of slide 4 in the teaming examples, there's a note that mentions a curricular impact. Can someone give a little more color to that, please?
Can you tell me where you're looking, please?
Not on the slide, it's in the note. When you open the presentation, in the Google Slides, there's notes on the bottom of some of them. This one says, all teams are big, floating teachers, curricular impact.
I don't have that on mine.
Oh, I see.
Can you see it?
I can see the note there, and that refers to just considering the professional learning that we would have to make sure that we provide for staff who are teaching across grade levels.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, yeah, if teachers are teaching across grade levels, there would have to be professional learning for the content standards, but that's something that should be happening anyway, more frequently than it does, because it's children in any given class might be at standards at the grade level before or after. So in order for teachers to properly differentiate, that's just good practice. And additionally, we want our staff to be able to know where kids are coming from and where they're going next, and really the 6-12 continuum.
So would that have budgetary implications? Would that cause those teachers to maybe be pulled out of the classroom more? Like, how would that look in terms of like the way that that's accomplished?
Well, we would have to take a look at the current professional learning time that we have, including the time before school starts. There's wraparound time, there's team meeting time, there's grade level meetings. It just, there's a variety of time available that we could accomplish that.
Do you have some of that development built into the budget already if this is a model that we would?
Mhm.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions on team model to start? Okay. Any other area of the budget? Yes, Dennis.
If I can go back to the transportation, Rich, I can't remember if I saw it or not, but does bringing the transportation of special education or some of the special education in-house affect our excess cost reimbursement?
So we're able to file for excess costs, whether it's our people or if it's a contractor. So some of the cost will be less, but then we can factor in when it's ours, we can factor in things like fuel, we can factor in things like the insurance on the vehicle. So nothing material in terms of where we'd have to adjust excess cost down or up.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, John.
I was just going to say net, it's a vast savings, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I understand. Understand. Yeah, understood.
Thank you, Don. Okay. Is there anything else anybody would like to talk about before we go into next week? Yes, Robin?
On the elementary specials teachers, the question I have, and maybe this is more to do with music, just given some of the constraints or it's the larger cut than the art or the PE. The elementary schools they have increased over the past 5 years by 102 students, and over the next 5 years, they're going to also be increasing significantly. So one question I have is the efficiency analysis that was done seemed a little bit tight in some of the areas of specials, and I'm just wondering how that affects not only this next year, but the year after that, because it looks like it's getting changed a little bit more toward an itinerant kind of a model as opposed to the building specific teachers? I just wanted to get a little bit of information on that.
So we didn't take everything that the consultant had suggested, just to leave in a little bit of that model. As it is now, all of our instrumental music teachers are itinerant. We have one PE teacher who's itinerant. There's an art teacher, one of the Spanish teachers. So we have itinerant models now to avoid asking for additional FTE. So we're not looking to increase it. There would certainly be a few more, but it's not something that we can handle. Okay.
Marge, but in terms of forecasting over time, how does that look when in your conversations with the consultant? Are you doing?
Right. We still feel that we have a cushion to, that would be able to absorb additional enrollment. It would be unlikely that it would break so many sections over so many schools that it would cause us to need extra FTE in the near future.
Okay. Katie?
Thank you. Rich, when we were talking about the transportation earlier, you made a reference to restoring the secretarial position last year. I just would be curious to know in relation to the specials as to the point that Robin brought up. What if it's cut too small? What does the process look like?
So you have one of two options. So if it's decided that it's cut too small before June 30th, the board could essentially reallocate fund within their existing budget. So by then you'd have whatever the appropriation is by the RTM. So if we thought maybe it was cut too small or too tight and it should have been a 0.8 music teacher instead of a 1.2, the board could choose to reallocate, adding a 0.4 essentially as that example back to music, and then you'd have to take something back. The other alternative is similar to what you would do during the year. If you tipped a section, you would run the course and see if you can make transfers to adjust that, and then the board would vote whether or not to fund that or not. I will say the typical practice throughout the Durg and Fairfield County when it comes to elementary specials is to adjust up or down fractionally those specials. So for example, like in New Canaan and Ridgefield and Wilton, every time there's an adjustment in class sections, whether it's up or down, you do typically see in most districts a change up or down fractionally across those subjects like music and PE and art. This district has not done that historically.
Sorry, to make sure I understand, you are talking about more of an itinerant model versus like a dedicated building teacher?
This would add more itinerants, yeah.
Rich, can you expand on that process? Are you recommending that we consider adjusting specials along with?
So that is the typical process. It could be that if 4 or 5 years down the road, if you end up having to have 2 more sections at Hinley, that's just as an example, it might mean that in that year, you might be making music or an art teacher instead of a 0.8 or a 1.0, 1.2 or 1.4, however it works out. That is typically what you see if you look at other budgets in Fairfield County.
I think given all of the building that's going on and expectations of fluctuation and enrollment, I would recommend that as a practice, we build in flexibility to our.
So I just want to reiterate, we have built in flexibility into this year's budget for that. I would continue to build in flexibility, just to ensure we are accomplishing the delivery of the programs that we're accustomed to, and that would be very clear with any reductions. I feel very comfortable with what I have on the table here. But there's other areas where I would feel uncomfortable reducing further, particularly as you say, some of the things that are going on.
Marge, can you speak to the hiring? If we're going to move up and down fractionally, how challenging does that make it?
So, it really depends where it ends up, but hiring a 0.2 would be pretty impossible, but teachers are oftentimes willing to teach an overage because it adds to their retirement and their current income. So, those fluctuations that Rich is talking about, they do fluctuate, but there aren't huge fluctuations every year that would make that impossible to hire.
Anyone else? Dennis?
Sorry, kind of tying into what Katie asked, on the reduction of staff of middle school and elementary school. I'm trying to phrase my question. How do we judge success or failure of that? And what do we do if we're in middle of September and you're getting complaints and things aren't going well? What do we do?
Well, we have to execute earlier than the middle of December, right? So, or September, right? So, clearly we got to deliver on being able to implement what we're suggesting here. So that's the majority of it in terms of, structurally, the design of it, and then process wise and implementation wise, does it go smoothly? Are we seeing it? Is there anything that we're seeing that would be abnormal or otherwise, from what we had promised or delivered? But I think it's just, it's the execution and the design and the implementation.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Greg.
Just some clarification questions on the special ed consulting services table that was put together. Just want to understand how I'm reading this. So we've got the contracted individuals. Are the equivalent FTEs, is that saying, here's how many FTEs we would need to hire to replace the contracted individuals if we were to bring them on full-time?
So the contracted people do a certain amount of hours. And so an employee here is effectively 1,200 hours for the year. So it's taking the hours that the contractors are providing and back again to that 1,215 hours to get you that individual FTE. So we do have, for the contractors, we have a lot of people who are part-time. So they're not the equivalent of a full-time. So which is why you see like contracted speech or contracted OT is either more or less than the equivalent FTE.
And are the numbers that we see, like for the contracted individuals, 14 for speech, 8 for contracted OT, is there any overlap? Is that all 14 different people from the 8?
So the 8 don't exist because they're not our employees, as an example. So like if we look at speech, there are 14 different people that the various providers give us who work a variety of hours. Some are working only a few hours a week. Some are working the equivalent of a full-time load. So that number of hours equals what 6.5 full-time employees would look like.
Okay. And has any work been done to look at this and see if bringing it much of this in-house, I mean, it's almost $3 million a year.
So if
look
we
like?
look at, so we brought forward the idea regarding the paraprofessionals, which would, the BCBAs, for example, an in-house BCBA with benefits is about $130,000. So for the equivalent would be about $400,000. I'm sorry, looking at OT, I'm sorry. So the OT is about $143,000 if we were to hire them. So if we were to hire 9.5, you're looking at about 1.4 million. So that would be more expensive. PT is roughly flat. Speech depends on the individual. There are cases across the district where, just not speaking educationally or what the services are financially, there are probably 2 to 3 that could be the equivalent of what we would pay or less. But you'd still have to have a mixture because there are some that are either too expensive compared to what we would pay, or they don't work enough hours and we couldn't hire like a 0.4 speech person.
And there's no professionals that can cross between these categories?
Typically, no.
Robin.
Just related to that, there was another presentation where you were talking about the behavioral kind of consulting fees, which was like $1.1 million. Is it more effective to continue to use those vendors and consultants as opposed to trying to do in-house for those specific kinds of services?
So the 2 areas that are really potentially more cost effective, and not entirely, but in part, are the paraprofessionals and the speech. The OT and the PT, not so much. And then the BCBAs, not so much. I will say, just talking to other finance directors throughout Fairfield County, there are districts who have in-house BCBAs. And I know of one district not that far from here that lost all of their BCBAs in a given year and couldn't fill them. So that it is an area of difficulty. So leaning on the contractor is relatively helpful. But the 2 areas that could be looked at as potential are portions of the speech, but not all, and then paraprofessionals.
Shirley, do you want to add anything?
And the only thing I would add to what's Richard explaining, Robin, is that on the BCBAs, those are associated with the paraprofessionals that are being supported. So there's a formula of how much time a BCBA spends with that contracted paraprofessional.
This is a specific type of paraprofessional. They have many more than 5 in the district.
I
Robin,
have a different question. So this, I know we've talked at length about the proposal for the assistant principals with ratios and every different kind of way. But the question I have after thinking a lot about this and kind of is really more the question of, with Middlesex and Darien High School, we've seen declining enrollment in general over the past 5 years. And then over the next 5 years, it's slowly growing, basically. And so the question I have is, why is it at this time that you're recommending adding an additional assistant principal as opposed to, say, 5 years ago, when we were kind of at a peak? That's really what I'm trying to understand better.
It's just, I think it's fair to say that the needs of our students over the last number of years have increased. I think I would say that's nearly indisputable in many ways, right? Just the social emotional needs, the behavioral needs, the instructional needs of the students, they've all increased.
Okay, thank you.
is Carolyn still there? Does she want to add anything?
I think she's still there.
I am. I think Alan captured it. We just have a lot more complex needs of students, especially coming out of the pandemic, and an increase in meetings. And, we would like to be more present and visible in the classrooms, helping with instruction, offering teacher support, student supports, and just looking at that in general is why we had asked for another assistant principal.
Okay, thank you.
Katie,
Thank you. Rich, I just want to go back to the consultant question quickly. Have you looked at what changes the budget might experience if we moved the SLPs?
So like as I said, you can't do all of them. It just simply wouldn't work. I think financially, there are some that you could put and it could, be in the range of $100,000.
So was there discussion, like when the new contract came and the 4 were moved over as part of like the administrative update to this budget, was that looked at for that category?
So Shirley and I did discuss it slightly. Obviously some of it depends on the student's needs and the specific IEPs. We did talk a little bit about which ones were capable, certain ones that like on paper might look like they were capable, but maybe not capable because of the specialty that they have. But I can defer to Shirley.
And I think we spoke about that, Katie, earlier also. I think I gave examples of feeding and swallowing, were some examples of contracted service providers that do multiple students and work with families. So those were things that we are going to continue to contract with, the ones that we thought we could move over, the ones that we considered. I think we also said that we'll continue to look at that as the year goes on based on IEPs and services that are recommended for students for either new entrants or students currently in district.
Bobby,
This is maybe an easier question about the gate receipts. I had proposed the turkey bowl ticket price. I wanted to just confirm that what you put in the budget would still assume that Darien High School students would each get a free ticket and that the increase in revenue would be just for people that are paying.
Just for
tickets.
purchase tickets.
Okay, and do we have a sense of what New Canaan charged or charges? Is it 10? Okay, I mean, my increase was really more driven by our increased costs for officiating and rentals and everything else. So thank you for the clarification.
do we know if they're looking at raising theirs?
They did not propose raising.
Anything else, Katie? Are you looking like you have something?
Yes, it's a different topic. I was just making sure we're ready. Okay. So I had 2 questions that I wanted to follow up on regarding the restructuring of the special education admin. And these were mentioned in the public hearing last week as well, but I think that the questions bear answering too. So Amy, I think that when I had asked a question about, why we were preserving in the budget the director of elementary education as opposed to the curriculum coordinator, you had responded that that you felt it was really critical to have someone who could provide consistency and oversight across the 5 elementary schools so that there's coherence and implementation. And I guess I want to ask why why we're not holding to that same standard for SES.
I'm not sure why we are holding to the same
Well,
standard.
not if you eliminate the K-5.
No, I think the equivalent, Katie, would be a better example of supervision and evaluation is what the director of elementary can do, and that's not what a coordinator can do. In our design for K through 12.
Sorry, I just want to be clear. I'm not talking about the curriculum piece. I'm just talking about the special education. That was just a
So the
comparison.
equivalent would be that our program directors, both on middle school, 6 through 8, and in the high school, 9 through 12, and the K through 12 director would all have that oversight and supervision and evaluation of staff and related service providers. There's nothing being eliminated by having a K through 12 in terms of on-site supervision. I think what we explained was also we have 2 assistant principals in the elementary school, which offer oversight and evaluation and supervision as well.
So my question then is the difference between the elementary school model versus the middle school or the high school is that the middle school and the high school are both singular buildings. So the program directors that are being proposed for the middle school and high school, they are in their building for all of their students. That is not the case for the elementary. At the elementary, there are 5 buildings. So my question is, why not having one person at central office that pulls together that cohesiveness that was spoken about across all 5?
Well, you would continue to have it in a different model. The K through 12 model would still ensure that cohesiveness of elementary and support the assistant principals, which has one in every building that's also on the ground, as you said, in the building, supervising instruction and implementation.
So 2 things to that. The first is those APs, the SES APs that are in each building, 3 out of the 5 of them are in their first year. So they are new, they are not established, they are learning the ropes. In one of those 3, the entire administration team is new this year, some not even from the beginning of the year. So the K through 12 is essentially really kind of doubling the position as to what it's been. So where we used to have one person K through 5 with oversight, now we have a person K through 12, so there's less. Our APs are not fully established. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of this budget seems to be driven by special education symptoms, specifically PPT numbers. We've heard a lot about that. But what I don't see in this budget is an expansion of special education services. There's not a single special education teacher added here. We're reducing an admin for oversight when we have new admin to a program that is still new with people that are even newer. And I just have concerns about how this is actually, this is not better. I don't see how it can maintain. It's very hard for me to see how this is anything other than a loss.
So I don't know how to convince you otherwise, other than what we've shared with you, but perhaps this will at least reaffirm what our thinking is. When we first designed, we had SES facilitators, as we spoke about at several meetings, and the design was to replace them or change their capacity by having assistant principals with special education expertise. We also did comment last time we had spoken about the notion that there are 3 new APs and that they have been supported and have been really strongly supported and effectively supported by Kristen. And Kristen really feels that she has given them the capacity to really go on their own and implement what they are doing. That said, we know they're still new. We know they still need support, and we're confident the K through 12 director would be able to do that, precisely because we do have a person in middle school and high school at the same time that will be in those buildings. I don't want to minimize the importance of the assistant principals in those elementary schools and their capacity for implementation and fidelity and coaching for teachers. And I think that we're confident that they have that capacity and that agency to do. We also recognize we'll continue to support them with the K through 12 director.
Alan and Amy, is there anything either of you would like to add?
I would just say that I do believe this is a better model for support services. Admittedly, there are small improvements along the way in the sense of what you see as added on or taken away, but in added on, we've extended the program directors at the high school and the middle school to support our students through the summer in particular. But this, just because there seems to be, or there is one reduction in FTEs, doesn't mean to say it's not a better model. This is, in my opinion, this is a better model, in the opinion of the director of assistant superintendent for special education, is a better model. And we are addressing the K through 12, the coherence of the model. We're using the experience of the people we have. Yes, we have some people who inexperienced in the sense of the number of years, but they are certified and trained in special education. We'll continue to support those as we would professional learning of any of our staff. But I don't think this is just driven, this budget would not be correct to say it's driven by special education. The number of the descriptions that I've given at nearly every board meeting around what we're trying to do in support services, all for regular education students, special education students, that's what's framing the budget.
And just maybe one other thing to add with, especially with regard to the SCSS K-12 or ELP through grade 12 position, also working alongside Laura Straighten, there might be a different opportunity to support transitions year over year and also grade level bands, elementary, middle, and high. And additionally, I know part of this discussion was around having more time for some of the administrators to be able to be available and work in the summer, which would support the transition from going into ending the school year, going into ESY, and then from ESY back into the next school year. Because a lot can be lost in translation when you don't have that, when you don't have the staff in those months in the summer. Something else we've discussed.
And one other thing, and I think all the board members do recall this, but just to reiterate it, is that in the new collective bargaining contract, elementary APs work an extra 10 days. So they now have 20 days to support the elementary programs, in addition to the regular contractual agreement.
John?
I also just wanted to point out that our special ed net budget is up $2.9 million year on year as proposed, Rich.
Correct.
Thank you.
That's not driven by adding resources, correct? I mean, let's clarify what the 2.9 is
It's
driven.
primarily tuition.
Thank you. So not FTEs or SCTs or human
The
resources.
FTEs are just the paraprofessionals.
Thank you.
So there are FTAs. I'm just giving numbers, folks. Facts.
Yes,
Facts.
you're giving numbers as
And FTEs are included.
to try to discredit the point that was being made.
I'm
or the
not trying to
question that was
discredit.
being
I'm trying to
asked.
reinforce what this budget represents.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Robin?
I have a question on RC 19 and curriculum, just a couple things. So curriculum development, the increase this year is $33,000. I'd like to understand, I know that there are some stipends in there for department chair work over the summer, but is the bulk of the curriculum development budget for publishing the curriculum as it's revised? And is that just in EduPlanet, or is it basically publishing it for all of the different courses? I just want to understand what the costs are and why it increased this year.
That, and then another example would be for ELP, needing to think about writing and revising curricula, for example, for play-based learning. So there are those costs that you've indicated, and then more discipline or department-specific costs.
And can you explain just kind of, I don't know if it's easy to talk about why it increased $33,000 versus last year? Or is there a main driver of that, or is it just a number of things?
I think a number of things, but one thing in particular is in the time that I've been working with the department chair team, we've developed that curriculum writing and revision cycle, which is now, I think, helping us to have a more clear understanding of where we are pre-K through grade 12 and across all of the departments. So this is the pace of the work that I feel comfortable with us accomplishing. I think in this particular budget, we've provided a lot of detail, and more so than maybe in fiscal year 24, about which are the curriculum projects that we're anticipating.
Okay. I mean, is part of that the literacy
That's another part of
revisions
it.
that are going to be going on as well?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
So those are the example of play-based learning, or for example, literacy legislation, are two examples of impetus for change, right?
Okay. Okay, and then my second question has to do with the professional development line. So the budget has a 20% increase versus this current year. Is there a large driver of why that is increasing as significantly versus this current year?
So some of the legislated and mandated requirements that we have to meet are an example. And then additionally, when you write and revise curriculum, I believe very strongly that you have to match that with not only shifts in instructional practice and practices for assessing learning outcomes, you also have to make sure you're matching professional learning opportunities to support curricular implementation.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Greg,
Just a procedural question. Are we going through this list again or?
we will next week, unless you have something specific you want to talk to on this list. We'll
I
go
just
through
didn't
next
know if we
week
were
and-
going to go through and make sure that people were still comfortable with what's on there and all that.
We certainly can. If there are things people want to change about it, we certainly can. Yes, Julie?
Would you mind, Jill, just giving us a couple more sentences on how it will run next week as far as moving and needing to be seconded and how much discussion can or will or might happen
Sure.
before a vote would happen on an individual item? That'd be helpful.
Sure. So we'll go through the spreadsheet in order. In order for an item to be discussed, it would need a first and a second. So we're asking that whoever put the item forward make the motion. I'll send some language out in advance so we can have a common language, or Sarah will. And then if it's moved, and if there's a second, then that opens it for discussion. That gives the board the opportunity to talk about it. And when the discussion concludes, we'll take a vote up or down. If the item is rejected, then the budget stays as is. If the item is accepted, the budget is adjusted either up or down accordingly. And then that goes into the final calculus of the number that we vote on. Because we'll take an overall vote of the operating budget and then the capital budget.
And can people change what is on the spreadsheet? Can you
Yes.
Explain that.
Yeah, so for example, if we were looking at, let's do something easy. If we're looking at Rich's turnover number, no, not that one, Robin's salary savings number, where she just put 100,000 out. Having looked at the historical, if she decided 1,000 was still the right number, or she thought 65 was a better number, or 70 was a better number, she can make a motion to amend it. And then we go through an amendment process. Yes, Craig?
So just more procedural stuff. So like when I look at this spreadsheet right now, there's $840,000 of net changes, but that's only from the admin changes. If you plug in all yeses, so let's say just pretend that we accept all of these changes, that negative
Yeah.
804 goes to negative 24. We're still about $1 million shy of the guidance that we got last week.
So
Yeah.
just for clarity, you can't do yeses for everything because there are some
I
duplicative
know.
ones.
I just did it because for illustrative purposes, but we're still short. So it goes to negative 24. We're still shy $1 million. So is there an ability, like, where do we go from there? Is there an ability for us to ask for not specific changes, but broader changes? So if I were to say, can we see what $1 million of savings in admin broadly, what would that look like? Or $750,000 of special ed savings, what would that look like without getting into the particulars?
We can't, without getting into the particulars at this stage, no. We would have to actually specifically vote on line items. We don't have the ability to say, take $1 million off. We are actually at the line item level. So we'd have to, in order to vote for the budget, we'd have to adjust it ourselves. We'd have to do that work in the room. Typically why we go through this process up to this point is so that we, get to a point where
What if we
everybody's
add
kind
them
of,
today? Could we add them today and then we can see what that looks like or no?
technically you can add up until we vote.
So can we look and see what that would look like or ask Dr. Hadley to give us, here's what it would look like if we did that?
What?
If you ask,
What number?
If we needed $1 million of savings in admin, what would that look like?
Well, I think they'd have to prepare that. I don't know that we would just get that on the fly.
So
We could,
without, like, I can't make the estimation because I'm not getting the operations as we've talked about, but if
right.
we needed $1 million of savings, we need to put it to Dr. Alley to come up with that. I don't want to wait until next week to come to say, hey, we need $1 million. So I'm bringing it up now.
I hear you.
Where, can I just clarify this question?
Sure.
So where are you coming up with that $1 million number that you're looking for?
It's hard to know what the number is going to be until we go through the process, but if I
Right,
put in all yes.
And I think what you have to remember is that it was guidance. It was not, we don't need to hit that number at our meeting next Tuesday.
Right, but so if I think we should hit that number,
That's fair. That just the way you said that, it seemed like
Yeah.
we were,
I'm saying we're getting guidance. I'm taking that guidance. If I agree with that guidance and I want to hit that number, then
Yep. Dennis?
I think with that comment, it might be helpful to walk through the entire process of how it works after we approve a budget and then what happens after that through the process of the Board of Finance and RTM.
Okay. So,
And what abilities they have to adjust the budget
sure.
specifically.
And start with the approval of our entire budget, actually.
Yep. So next week, we'll go through add cut. Well, then we'll get a final bottom line number. We'll vote that budget up or down. If you vote it down, then it reverts to this year's budget. So
If the board voted it.
if the board, excuse me, if the board were to vote it down, so it's not customary to do that, but that's what would happen. Subsequent to that, I'm going to assume it gets voted up. We will submit the budget to the Board of Finance on March 5th. And that's a formality. They just receive it at that time. They have a public hearing shortly after that, and then they go through a series of deliberations based on their financial structures. At that point, the Board of Finance may make any adjustments to the budget if Rich gets some additional information about the transportation number that could move the budget up or down. We could send that information to the Board of Finance. They could adjust accordingly.
But with that, the Board of Finance cannot take out an item. They can only adjust a dollar amount. They can say, we want $1 million out of this budget, but they can't tell us where to get it. They can
Correct.
just say $1.
Correct. So that's called line item veto. We are the only entity with line item veto, which is why we do go through the budget line by line. Once the Board of Finance receives it, they can tell us, we love your budget, go forward. We don't love it. We want you to cut out 100,000, $1 million. That's their right, if they get the majority. If that happens, as it did happen a couple of years ago, typically we would go through and adjust the budget, but we typically let it go through the RTM first because the RTM also doesn't have line item veto. We'll adjust it up or down. And then we would vote after the RTM to reallocate. Yes, Dennis?
RTM cannot adjust up.
Excuse me, thank you. RTM can only adjust down. Thank you. Okay, fair point. Anything I've missed in that process? Dave, then Katie.
So the next step in that scenario, Board of Finance, RTM go through, they say you have to remove $1 million. The next step is we defer to administration, we go line by line ourselves. What exactly happens in that sequence at that stage?
So then we go through line by line ourselves. Again, we vote line by line and we end up just assigning the presumably reductions to each.
But we would use administration for guidance.
Right.
In terms of prioritizing.
Correct. Administration would give us
Okay, so
we would not, we would not go through ourselves and take out $1 million. Administration would hand us a proposal. Let's not use $1 million. Let's say 100,000. Administration would give us a proposal for that number.
Well, $1 million gets our attention, but
Yes.
so I guess part of the reason I framed it that way is when I think about Greg's question, it would be interesting to know now, and we won't have the opportunity to do this work next week, but we could give Rich and Al a little bit of time in the what if scenario. If it's $1 million, where are you thinking about that? And that maybe would inform our work next week as we go through it.
Okay. Katie?
Thank you. One small comment, I think it's helpful to because this is so complicated, to think about the spirit and the spirit of the administration and Board of Ed is to put forth a budget that meets the needs for teaching and learning. And the spirit of the Board of Finance is to say if the town can afford that budget. Sometimes that's helpful to just distill into that. Question for you procedurally. I know you had mentioned that you were asking people who had made adds and cuts to motion, but I just wanted to clarify that should an add or a cut have been made by another board member and they don't initially bring them, that still, as long as a person motions and seconds, it
Yes.
can go forward.
Someone else
Thank you.
can pick it up. Yes. Yes. Go ahead, John.
I just, I've been elected twice now and I take my role as serving all constituents in this town. So I am sensitive to all taxpayers as well as our students and our parents. I mean, I guess we should get a consensus of the board if we do want to pursue Greg's exercise of, and seeing if it's feasible to put something like that together. Almost, I would encourage maybe separate of this spreadsheet, just so we don't get confused. If tasks and see, and I kind of smirk, just given the struggles that we are having right now with the proposed budget. But if tasks with another $1 million reduction on top of what we've done, is that kind of what you're looking for? So on top of what you're looking at now, what would the administration recommend to the board? Is that what you're going for?
Yeah.
I mean, we can ask for it.
Can I just ask a question, Greg, if you don't mind, to clarify? You had specifically said out of admin. Did you specifically want it to come out of the administrative RC? Or you just mean out of the?
Well,
budget?
yeah, so the administrative RC is like RC 16. There's not $1 million in that one.
Okay, so that you didn't mean
This
that.
would
I
be
just
like,
wanted to
I
confirm.
was thinking admin like across all the RCs, because admin is in a lot of different RCs. Special ed is also in a lot of different RCs. Special ed is much
So
larger, $28 million.
Greg, I would suggest that rather than dictate where it come from, if that's an exercise you want us to
We should
undertake,
have them.
let's have them determine
Yeah.
where it should come from.
Yeah.
Is this something the board wants to do? Do you want to ask? Yes, Katie?
I am not in favor of backing into a number.
Dennis?
I think we go through the process and to Mrs. Lublin's point, and I think I tried to say this last night, maybe not so eloquently. I think we're trying to develop the best budget to educate students of Darien, and what that number is what that number is. And we're trying to be fiscally responsible in getting there. And then it's up to us to work with our partners of the RTM and Board of Finance to get the final number, and to come in with a number now seems arbitrary to me.
I'm not in favor of this as well. I'm not going to back into a number.
We could ask, Rich is always working. We could ask if he's squeezed the lemon any harder. Which is a little different from backing into a number, but might be a compromise.
I would support if Rich has any other fabulous memos in his back pocket. I would be open to seeing them. But short of that, I am not interested in asking the administration to go through this exercise at this time.
John?
I like the spirit. I just think it's a little late in the process. And I do think, again, we can, think about it long and hard as individuals this week if you'd like to add something. But I just think at this point, given what we've been through, and to just throw another $1 million potential, it would be a little disruptive to the community at this point, and going through all the hearings. So that's kind of my gut right now. But I do think we're going to have another go at the spreadsheet.
Dave?
I appreciate the other comments. I'd be curious to see it really, just to sort of frame the argument and have people understand where the administration would look if we were to go into that exercise. $1 million's a little bit arbitrary, but I don't think there's harm in doing that exercise. I think if we wind up in a situation where we're going line by line for ourselves, having had that guidance previously would be beneficial if we do wind up in that situation. If we don't wind up in that situation, sorry for wasting your Sunday, Rich.
Okay, well, that's not much consensus, board members. Robin?
Just in terms of the timing, if it did go to, say, to the Board of Finance and to the RTM, and they both said you have to cut, what is the timing of when we would be doing that exercise? Is that in June?
So
Okay,
you,
that-
so you have until June 30th to reconcile your budget. Ideally, you don't want to wait until June 30th, but by June 30th, you have to reconcile to whatever the appropriation.
And
So-
that starts after the RTM meeting, which I believe is in May.
But
Is
we
that
did
right?
it.
May, the
Did-
first weekend.
Go ahead, Marbet.
So the RTM votes in May, so should they not vote for the appropriation that the Board of Ed approves, you would have from that moment till June 30th to make the decision. If we look at what we did last year, where we made some changes, I believe we did it towards the end of May, so it was a couple weeks after, but before.
Two
June 30th.
years
about-
ago?
And we did
What
it
about
during COVID.
2020? Yeah, what about
Yeah.
2020?
So 2020 was we got a cut during COVID, and then the board reconciled, I believe it was in May or early June.
Right.
So it'd be nice to be able to avoid that process probably if possible, I would think. But-
That was the impetus for the question.
Pardon?
That was the rationale for the
For the
question.
question.
But I do think Mr. Sini brings up a point is that the purpose of having a public hearing is to alert the public of what we're looking to do and to then kind of do this literally at the last moment, kind of subverts all of that good work that we've done.
I'm going to disagree with you on the purpose of the public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to hear from the public what they value about the budget. That is statutorily what we're asked to do. We do put it where we put it because it supports additional dialogue. So I'm not quibbling with the point you're making, which is we do try to engage the public along the way. But the stated purpose of it, that not every board does ad cut. So the statutory reason isn't because of ad cut. Julie?
I would just add though, again, to the timing point, that it's also a quick turnaround for the 9 of us. It's a quick turnaround for all of you to get that work done and for the 9 of us to digest that and decide if we have any more questions on what's being proposed to then vote on it in very short order, I think is, while I appreciate the spirit of the question, I do think that it's almost irresponsibly rushed at this stage of the game.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to ask Rich for anything else that he might have in his back pocket?
Always.
No?
Well, the board certainly can ask us to do what we have to do, that's fine. We've got this budget in at the number that we've got in with the reductions, that we had to make. So I would imagine any further reductions at this point may not be too palatable, but that's what we can discuss, but and we can certainly see it in a magic memo somewhere, but I'm not for sure.
Magic.
But I just, this was brought in with some difficult choices already made on this, so it's gonna be
Okay.
difficult to do that.
I would agree with that. We're having trouble with the choices in front of us for good reason. So if there is anything, I hear the spirit of your question, Greg, and I appreciate it. But if there is anything that is seemingly easy to discuss, given that we won't have time to iterate over it, let's bring that forward. Otherwise, I think let's continue through the process and see where we go. All right. Yes, Julie?
Just out of curiosity, Rich, have any of our neighboring or Durg A towns, districts approved a budget yet?
So New Canaan did approve, the Board of Ed approved, but not the town.
Yep.
They were at 6.5.
Okay.
Greenwich, the superintendent proposed a 5.5 without health insurance, and the board brought it down to about 5.5, but again, not approved by the town. Weston came in at about 3.5, and their board brought it down to about 2.8, but again, not approved by the town. And Westport, Ridgefield, and Wilton are still outstanding.
Thank you very much.
Can you send that wherever everybody is? Can you send that to us maybe early next week? So we just can have the latest before we get here, please. Okay. Anything else this evening? All right. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn this?
No.
Oh, public comment. I'm so sorry. With that, I'll move to public comment.
Good evening. If there's anyone in person who would like to participate, please come up to the podium. The chair will acknowledge you. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Sorensen. I am a resident of Monroe, Connecticut, and for the last 20 years, I've been a staff member here in the Darien Public Schools. And over that time, I've worn many hats. I am a teacher at Middlesex. I've served as a curriculum leader, a team leader, a coach at the high school, and a member of council's committees. And I share this background with you simply to establish what I think is my dedication to the students of this town. And tonight I come before you to focus on in a completely different capacity. As you can see, I am also the faculty advisor and musical theater director of Theater 308. And so I come, having come last week rather, and observed public comment and observed the public hearing. And so tonight I come as an advocate for over 100 students and all of the students at Darien High School who take advantage of the clubs and organizations that we have at that school. And I urge you to reject the recent addition of an activity fee as part of this year's budget plan. I recognize that building a budget is a complex process. I've watched and listened as you've painstakingly gone through item after item over and over again, and I know that you will do it again tomorrow or next week. However, an activity fee is not the answer, particularly one that singles out our theater students at twice the cost of any other club or organization. Theater 308 is an organization that prides itself on inclusion and providing new opportunities for its members. However, an activity fee will simply deter students from joining us after we worked so hard to rebuild following the pandemic. Like many other organizations, we lost so many things as a result of COVID. And as an organization, we are just now recovering in a way that matters most: the return of our membership to their home away from home. Please understand, an activity fee will force students and families to prioritize what they can afford over what they love. I recognize that in many ways, this entire budget debate is about that very issue. By instituting this fee, you are just passing the decision-making responsibility from you to our students. And while I'm all for teaching students fiscal responsibility, this isn't the way to do it. In closing, when this board went line by line through the budget last week, the activity fee came up, and Mr. Roney, you commented something to the effect of, "I don't like it." When it comes to the time to make that final decision next week, please go with that instinct and vote to remove that fee from this year's budget. Thank you.
Anyone else in person?
Laura Pesh Gray, 11 Parsons Walk. You all have heard me and seen me, and after hearing and listening to tonight's summary, there's certain things that I want to speak to. One is, after last week's discussion on the assistant principals, I don't see any quantifiable reasons for adding the assistant principal at the middle school or the high school. Dr. Adley, you said in your budget, when there was a paragraph for Middlesex, and it says there's declining student body of 121 students over 10 years, and therefore you're justifying cutting one team and 5 FTEs. But then you justify adding an assistant principal. It just doesn't make sense. Plus, the 0.6 FTE of music doesn't work out either. That 0.6 music teacher isn't just teaching that one team, it's teaching across all teams. So I also want to address another thing about safety. You can't put a price on safety, and cutting the campus monitor at Middlesex from 2 monitors to 1 is putting our kids' safety at risk. These 2 positions are critical, and they have very different responsibilities. One person's at the desk, the other one is outside, one is walking around the building. And the campus monitor's salary is $38,855. Do you really think the safety of our kids is not worth $38,855? Do we really need to cut costs here? I don't know if you know this, but the 2 campus monitors in Middlesex were both Norwalk SWAT police officers, and and they have about a 60 years experience between the two of them. So why not cut the SSO or the SRO? There's a floater that basically is dedicated to Middlesex, and actually increase the salary of the campus monitor so he doesn't have to work 2 jobs and still save money. Our strategic goal, fostering a culture that promotes wellness, diversity, and inclusion. Music and the arts satisfies the core values of the Portrait of the Graduate by welcoming diversity and inclusion. Please don't cut arts, music. Please don't cut our critical boots on the ground that teach our kids, that support our kids, that keep our kids safe. I really feel like the only reason to add the middle school assistant principals at the middle and the high is to lighten their load. And I really just wish that everybody could work harder so that our kids and the teachers and the monitors can actually do their jobs and really impact the children in our community. Thank you.
Anyone else in person? If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. Jackson Wood, you are unmuted and recognized.
Good evening, Dr. Hadley and the members of the Board of Education. My name is Jackson Wood. I'm a proud graduate of the Darien Public School District. I'm here today as both a concerned alumni and a passionate advocate for the arts. It appears to me that there's a concerning trend in the budget proposal of potentially discouraging participation in the arts and neglecting support for teachers who nurture said artistic education. From my own experience and observations, I firmly believe that arts play a vital role in our educational system. We've all read the countless studies and know it to be true. For many students, myself included, involvement in the arts is not merely a pastime, but a fundamental part of our identity and community. It's not just about putting on a single musical each year. It runs much deeper. It is much richer. It's lighting, it's set design, it's running an organization, it's fundraising. It's social media marketing, it's developing working relationships with faculty and admin, and so on and so on. Most importantly, it's all student run. While everyone may not pursue a career in the arts post-graduation like myself, I saw students all around me in grades above and below find love in the arts and theater. My post-graduation trajectory is unique, however, my love and experience in the theater and arts is very similar. Why would you discourage people from discovering this experience? It may not be obvious that it's right there in front of them. For me in high school, it'd be a no-brainer to pay whatever fee. But for someone who hasn't nurtured that love yet, I fear it will only hold people back, and not to mention, not everyone has the means to do so. And when it comes to my teachers and the proposed elimination of 2.0 FTE for the music department, it's really disheartening to see arts education teachers not being valued. I'm sorry, those people were the people who took care of me during my time in the district. They care for each of their students and want them in whatever capacity to find an appreciation for the power of the arts during their most formative years. Spreading those teachers thin only hinders their ability to have such connections. As someone who sat on the Board of Education Strategic Planning Committee, I recognize that budgeting is not straightforward, especially this season. However, I implore you to recognize just how important these item lines are to individual students, whether they realize it or not. I have already had so many countless professional opportunities, and I would not have been able to do that without the passion that was instilled in me from the countless music and arts teachers and my involvement in Theater 308. I had the privilege of working with in my time in Darien. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackson. There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay. Give it a second. All right, with that, may I have a motion to adjourn? That's Dave, seconded by Julie. All those in favor?